In 2010, creators Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat released a revolutionary new series based on the classic Sir Arthur Conan Doyle character, Sherlock Holmes. The audience is instantly thrown into a war flashback, and our protagonist, retired Afghanistan Army doctor John Watson, awakens in a cold PTSD-laden flashback. We meet Sherlock Holmes, a brilliant but borderline sociopathic consulting detective. We are then introduced to our mystery. Multiple people taking their lives at the hands of mysterious little pink pills. Instantly we know that this retelling is not going to pull any punches. The game, dear listeners, is on. Welcome back, feral audience. We are entering the second part of our Superwholock little tiny mini-series within the series for you, and today we are talking about the lock. As you heard from the intro, we're talking about Sherlock. Laurel.
Maya.
Your hair's looking very Sherlockian today.
I was trying. It had curls earlier, but then I drove here with the windows down, so...
It's really Benny Cumberbun of you.
It's a little more Matt Smith than Benedict Cumberbatch at this point. Sad.
Do you remember all the names that the little fandoms had for like Benedict Cumberbatch fans?
No.
It was Cumber bitches. I knew you'd hate that.
I hate it.
I knew you would hate that. I was a Cumber bitch.
No! Not like that.
I am to this very day.
I'm not a Cumber... I'm not even gonna say it. I cannot stoop to that level. I'm not one of those, but I am a Sherlock Holmes simp.
Yeah.
So.
In a very platonic sense.
Yeah.
A very platonic.
Simp is platonic, right? I have always loved Sherlock Holmes. When I was in my preteens, probably. I was obsessed with Sherlock Holmes.
When did you start watching the series?
I remember waiting in between seasons.
Mm-hmm. It was torturous.
So it was torturous. So it was definitely... I mean, the first season was out, if that helps.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to...
Why are you asking? You know, I have no perception of time.
Yeah, a terrible memory.
Yeah. But I loved the show.
I also loved the show. It was potentially more transformative than Doctor Who.
Oh,
watching Sherlock after starting Doctor Who, they were in very close succession to each other. So, I started watching Sherlock, and I was like, oh, this is the grown-up version of Doctor Who.
It's really not,
because it's dark.
My thing about Sherlock Holmes is it's a male fantasy, but it's one that's actually fun to watch.
I really hate that you pointed that out.
No, I'm sorry. We'll pretend I didn't say that. Go back.
No, I can't.
Go back to the time before I said that.
I can't. It's already happened.
But...
Do we just want to jump right into plot?
I mean, we can. I think so. You gave a pretty good overview in the intro.
Thank you. I was trying to do that this time. I was going to ask you for your opinions on the mystery in the first episode.
First time I watched it, I thought it was delightful. Watching it this time, I thought it was really cool that they basically give away from the very beginning that major spoilers ahead.
Yes, major spoilers for the pilot episode of the BBC Sherlock. Again, skip ahead if you don't want spoilers, but also Laurel and I are just kind of talking about our opinions across the board, so maybe just don't listen to us in general.
That's generally good advice.
Anyway.
I thought it was really interesting that from the get-go they give away the murderer is a taxi driver.
Yeah.
They literally set up the different victims...
By a taxi.
Either they're hailing a taxi or one character, someone takes her keys.
Yep.
So we know she doesn't have another way of getting home. It's so obvious in retrospect. That's fun.
Yeah.
I did think some aspects of Sherlock Holmes' deductions were a bit...
silly.
A little bit silly.
Just a little bit silly. A little silly goofy.
Silly goose.
I'd be lying if I didn't say the monologue where he explained the first deduction he ever really makes, where he explains to John how he knew all these things, and he talks about the phone and the fact that his brother has a drinking problem. And every person I know who's watched Sherlock to this day
makes fun of that.
Goes, I'm drunk. I'm drunk.
I'm trying to remember, because it's been a long time since I read Sherlock Holmes, but I think that was a direct reference to an original Conan Doyle deduction, which I want to say it was from, like, winding up his watch or something. There were scratch marks on the... where you would insert the key and twist it. I think that's what it was.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
that makes me appreciate it more, because that's kind of that's a brilliant translation to modern times.
Absolutely. There are actually a lot of moments in the Sherlock show where they do that, where they call back to, and they reinvent it entirely. I actually wrote down a couple that I caught in this episode, but the one that stands out to me, I think is really funny, is when the dead woman has scratched RACHE into the floor. And and then Anderson says Rache for German for revenge. And Sherlock's like, thank you, and shuts the door on him.
Yes.
And then he's like, of course he's not writing Rache, he's writing Rachel. Like,
yes.
Or she's writing Rachel, obviously. In the novel, it was the other way around. And, like, everyone's like, well, she must be writing, or the victim must be writing Rachel.
Like a name.
But German, then Sherlock's like, no, it's German for Rache. It's for revenge. Yeah, and that was, although, yeah, sorry. I just got excited, and now I'm muddling everything up, but.
What are you talking about? You've never done anything wrong in your life.
I've never been well-spoken. But anyway, I just thought it was really funny the first time I watched it, because I was like, oh, I see what they swapped it around. Little
oh, that's so
moment for but yeah, some of Sherlock's deductions, I forget which one it was in particular that I was like, that's stupid. That doesn't, like, there could be so many more explanations for that. But
yeah.
Anyway.
I was like, that's kind of how we felt watching Criminal Minds too.
Yeah.
We were like, this is a reach here.
You go into it, you have to accept to some extent that it is a bit of a superhero story, and his powers are extra natural.
Literally the only other notes I had was, like, I started watching it, and I said, I was like, let the queer baiting begin.
Oh my word. Watching it this time, I was really just was much more, homoerotic than I remembered.
Right? I was just like, because it's like, I think when you grow up in a conservative religious area, like, and you're kind of like, all these people saying that this is gay is ridiculous. Like, they're just two good friends. And then you kind of you grow up a little bit, you gain a little more understanding about the world, how people actually relate to each other, and then you go, they're gay. They're gay. They're so gay. I don't know what to tell you. Sherlock Holmes and John Watson in the BBC Sherlock series are gay. Anyway.
They have such good chemistry together. I just love them. I think that the strength of the episode is them working the case together. Like, from the get-go, they're just, like, in it together.
Yeah.
Like, Sherlock needs an audience, and Watson needs adventure, and they just provide that for each other.
They really are.
And they egg each other on in the worst ways. I like how Lestrade's like, maybe Watson will make Sherlock a better man. You should be worried more about Sherlock making Watson a worse man.
Well,
which immediately happens.
Immediately. But speaking of John and Sherlock, should we just jump into characters?
Yeah, absolutely.
Should we ping pong?
Yeah, let's ping pong.
Starting with John Watson?
Yeah. Yeah, because even though the show is about Sherlock, he's not the main character, but he is the main lens through which the story is told.
Yeah, he's sort of like our eyepiece into the world. I have less notes about John because I looked down and realized as I was watching I kind of got distracted by other notes, so all I wrote about John was depressed little baby.
He is a depressed little baby.
Yeah.
I think what I liked about John's characterization, because we start with him and we see the whole episode through his eyes and how he interprets everything. Mm-hmm. When Sherlock runs off to do his Sherlocking, we stay with John most of the time. Like, we stay behind with him. He's very isolated until he and Sherlock really make that connection.
Yeah, and then it switches.
And then it switches. And it is interesting also that in the scene where, you know, he's mysteriously picked up in the van, I thought it was really fun how the woman in the van and him, they never make eye contact. Unless I missed it, but every time he looks at her, she's looking forward, and every time she looks at him, he's looking forward. So it's like they're just not connecting at all. Like, John doesn't connect with normal people. Not that she was particularly normal.
What's your name? Anthea. That's not your real name, is it? No.
Did you ever get any free time? Oh yeah, lots.
Bye.
She's an icon. I love her.
And we never see her again.
We never see her. I just know she's living her best life, committing war crimes for the British government.
Yup. Yup.
But the interesting thing about John Watson is he doesn't, at least in the beginning, he doesn't have much of an identity outside of Sherlock. Mm-hmm. Like, everything about him is how he plays off of Sherlock in episode 1. I think as the show develops, he becomes more
of a fleshed out
character, but at least in episode 1, he's really the only thing is that he craves conflict. Yeah. And he has also PTSD at the same time. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting.
So again, spoilers. When Mycroft is talking with him, and he goes, "You don't fear the war. You miss it." And John's like, "Okay, we're done here."
Yeah.
I didn't ask to get read for filth by you, Mycroft Holmes.
Can I just say about the introduction of Mycroft? Like, what is that guy's name again?
Mark Gatiss.
Mark Gatiss, co-creator of the show and portrays Mycroft. They intentionally set it up so you believe that he's playing Moriarty.
Yes. Like
the first time you watch it, and he is so deliciously and quintessentially Britishly evil.
Oh, it's delightful.
like every British villain ever, he just oozes that kind of like upper class English malice.
Just like when he played
it's so delicious.
Just like when he played Lazarus in Doctor Who.
Mark Gatiss is also living his best life.
He is a gem.
He is a gem.
Did you want to say more about John?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the man, the myth, the legend.
The one and only. Yeah. Thank goodness.
Do you want me to just read some of my notes? Just my stream of consciousness.
From your mind palace?
From my mind palace. This really is just a stream of consciousness. My first thing I wrote down is he is such a little shit.
He is!
He is.
Sorry, you're gonna have fun correcting the levels on that.
Yeah, I think I dialed you down already.
Smart.
Just intentionally.
You knew I would get feral in this episode.
Yeah. I'm like, he's so... I said I forgot how mean he is.
Yeah, he's a jerk.
He's so awful. But also, I wrote, the chokehold that those curls, coat, and blue scarf had on me. This show kick-started my Benny Cumberbun addiction. I fully believe after watching this first episode that John Watson is... Sherlock Holmes may not be John Watson's soulmate, but John Watson is Sherlock Holmes' soulmate.
Absolutely, and Sherlock knows it from the moment he sets eyes on
him.
From
the moment. Like he invites John into his apartment. Oh. This man does not give a shit about what any other person on this godforsaken planet thinks about him. And the second John goes, "Oh yeah, like once we clear all this shit out," and then Sherlock immediately starts tidying everything. So like, sorry, I'm messy. Yeah. And John's like, "Do you have like a girlfriend?" Like trying to get to know him, and he's like, "John, I'm very married to my work. I'm very flattered." And John's like, "Nope, just asking."
Meanwhile, every time everyone assumes they're a couple, John's like, "We're not a couple." Sherlock is silent.
Moving past it, on to the next thing.
Sherlock's just like, "I wish."
In honor of Pride Month, I wrote down in all capital letters every time he's running down the street, "Move, I'm gay!"
Sherlock is kind of the quintessential gay disaster, like, archetype. See, I always loved Sherlock Holmes And I think canonically the original Sherlock Holmes is very asexual.
Absolutely.
This Sherlock Holmes is definitely gay. Maybe bi, but I don't even think so.
No.
I think he's just gay for John.
I don't think he's gay only for John and not interested in anybody else.
I think you're right, actually. He's literally only interested in John.
Like that's it. Like poor Molly is just sitting there. Speaking of, sorry,
gosh,
you
Molly
talk
was-
about Sherlock before we go talk about Molly.
Yeah. I wrote that he's a self-described sociopath who from the very beginning wants to win John over and impress him. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page there.
Mm-hmm.
It's also really fun that he's such an arrogant and childish character at the same time.
Yes.
Like, you need that to balance out how
Straight-laced.
smarter than everyone else he is. Oh, and how straight-laced John is.
Yeah.
Except John isn't entirely straight-laced either. He's got the crazy in him, too.
Oh, absolutely.
There's
But
a reason they hit it off.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote ride or die besties, and then I wrote troublemakers, and then I wrote rascals, because they are all of those things. They, like, literally just encourage each other to be terrible. Was there anything more we needed to say about Sherlock?
I think.
You think he's an anti-hero? You might be right.
I think he's an anti-hero because, like, one of my opening notes, I
He's
don't know
very
why it's not
selfish.
written down. The first time we're introduced to him, he's beating the shit out of a corpse to see how quickly bruises form.
I know.
Like, I'm like, he'll do a lot in the name of science.
I feel like the whole premise of the show is that he's more of a softy end of a good person than he ever wanted to let on, though.
It's true, but there is also the side of him that is like, he will go to great lengths to not be bored and to keep himself entertained.
Yeah, and at the expense of basically anyone and anything.
Yeah. And he's also a drug addict.
Yeah. But that's not a moral issue, I would argue.
He was the best guy around. What about all the murders he committed? What murder? Molly Hooper's next on my list.
I didn't even put her on my list because I'm a terrible person and I'm also sexist.
Here's where I wrote my note. I just said, just out here letting her crush commit atrocities to corpses.
To corpses who were people she knew.
Yes.
That's the worst part.
Mm-hmm. I knew him. He's really nice.
He's really nice.
I'm like, Molly. I am grateful for the arc that Molly goes throughout the series because her in the beginning is too sad.
I wonder, like, did they have some women be like,
maybe have her wake up.
Have some agency.
Yeah, instead of just being bullied by Sherlock 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. She does definitely have a really cool arc because eventually she becomes someone that Sherlock respects and trusts.
Mm-hmm.
I like Molly.
But clearly you didn't like her enough to make notes about her. So moving on to
the pilot episode, I mean, I just don't have anything to say. The only thing I remember about her is the lipstick crack, basically.
Yeah.
Your mouth's too small now.
Your mouth's too small now.
Okay,
And then she's
shut
like,
up, Sherlock.
She's like, okay.
I know. Poor thing.
So moving on then.
Yeah.
To Mrs. Hudson.
Yeah, she's on my list.
Oh, Mrs. Hudson. Our queen. All hail her and ascribe to her due honors.
Not your housekeeper.
Also, she's just like so savage all the time. She's like, I mean, not you. I can tell you're more the sitting down type.
I know, right?
I'll go get you some tea. You rest your leg.
Damn my leg! Sorry, Mrs. Hudson. She's literally obliterating him with her words, completely either oblivious or without any care about it.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing.
I just love her. She reminds me of my nanny.
She remains Mrs. Hudson throughout the entire series, and yet somehow still manages to surprise.
Oh,
I
yes.
just love her. I love Mrs. Hudson.
Let's talk about Lestrade.
I love Lestrade. He is just tired of everyone's shenanigans, but he's holding out hope for a better tomorrow. And I respect that about him.
I respect the way that he carries himself in press junkets, like when the reporters are asking him, like, how do we protect ourselves against a serial suicide? And he's like, well, like, it's pretty obvious, actually, just don't commit suicide.
And he says it with a deadpan face. Like, he is clearly wishing he was anywhere else.
Yep. Anywhere
like,
else.
His time is wasted here.
He's like, I do not want to talk to the bottom feeders of the London press.
And that is another thing we respect him for.
We respect our hustle king.
So this is a pretty big blank in my memory from the books, but I feel like I always had the impression that Lestrade was kind of stupid in the books. But it's been too long since I read them that I couldn't say for sure. But I love the BBC's portrayal of Lestrade.
Mm-hmm.
So after I blasted them for their portrayal of Irene Adler, I would like to throw them a bone
For Greg Lestrade.
Greg Lestrade, if that is his first name.
It is.
It is.
It is.
Yeah, he's just delightful. Oh, and another actor who appeared on Doctor Who. He plays the big game hunter. Remember that?
Oh my gosh, he does.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. A far less appealing character.
Welcome to the BBC. We have 12 actors, 3 sets, and 5 costumes.
And about as many props. That brings us to atmosphere.
Atmosphere.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you, I tried really hard.
Yes.
I said...
Go on.
So the title of this episode is A Study in Pink, a play on the original A Study in Scarlet, if I'm not mistaken.
You are not mistaken, unless I'm mistaken about you not being mistaken.
I don't know, but I wrote a funny little joke and I said, A Study in Pink, more like a study in show, don't tell, baby.
Gosh, Maya, you're so right. Literally, I made a note about that as well.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I was stunned at how much information was just revealed to us visually without the characters having to mention
I
it.
literally made a note about it. And can I very quickly interject? You love when I interrupt you, right?
Yes.
Speaking of visual storytelling, this isn't something that was in the script. It's just this, as far as I would imagine not. It's this little moment between John and Sherlock that just illustrates why I think they have such great chemistry on screen together. John says, "Read your blog," and Sherlock makes this like little smile, little smirk that quickly disappears, and he's like trying to hide that he's like very he's very flattered that John has found his blog, and he's like, "What did you think?" And then John just gives him this face, and Sherlock gives him this like offended face back. Like, it's such a little moment, but there's so much communicated just through like their facial expressions. Like, they are beautiful actors. The moment cracked me up so much I had to go back and watch it again just to like, you know, do my cackle laugh a second time.
Yep.
It was just I just loved it. That's not exactly what you're talking about, but I did think about it being like this entire little conversation just fully through their facial expressions.
I appreciated, I'm taking this in a less wholesome direction, but in the beginning, as like they're setting up like the different people who are being murdered, like the one guy who gets into the cab is on the phone with a woman in like this blue silk blouse, and she like makes sure no one's listening, and then she says "I love you," and he goes, "When?" And she's like, "Get a cab."
Yes.
And then he commits suicide, and then we see a press conference or a memorial service where his wife is talking.
Yeah.
And then you realize he was having an affair with the blonde secretary, and it's just like these little moments of world building. Like, they're not holding your hand, they're not explaining it to you.
And for a moment, you have a thought process of like maybe he was killed because he was an adulterer.
Yes.
Like, a lot of shows do stuff like that, but then they kind of dispel that myth pretty quickly when you see how many different types of people were targeted. The moment that I thought about it was the very beginning, because I think we go a minute and about a little over a minute and a half before we actually have our first line of dialogue. Mm-hmm. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you are telling a story in TV or even in movies, that is a long time. And before even the first line of dialogue is spoken, this is what we know about John Watson. We know that he is a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
We know that he has PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
We know that he has negative emotions towards his cane because he looks at it and he kind of like...
Yep.
You can see the emotional reaction in his face and body language, which, again,
Yes.
credit to Martin Freeman's acting. Incredible.
Yeah.
We know that he keeps a gun in his desk drawer.
Yes.
Which isn't really this place you would store it if you were trying to put all that behind you.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that he keeps a blog, and we know that it is John Watson because we see the blog of John Watson.
Mm-hmm.
Very creative title. But yeah, we just learn a lot before even a single line of dialogue is spoken.
Which...
It's pretty impressive.
Some people in modern cinema could learn a thing or two from just watching the BBC Sherlock.
I wonder if this episode's gonna pass. We just play our cards so close to the vest, it's hard
We
to tell.
do. I've never had an opinion in my little life. Stand
Why
for
start now?
pines,
Please
I rebuke thee. Sorry. Sometimes I just need to let little Gideon out of his cage for a little bit.
You gotta let little Gideon out of his little bird cage.
Does that bring us to other?
About atmosphere, it's also very English, I think, which is really fun. For me, it was one of the first, well, that and Doctor Who. But it feels more British in a way somehow, more English in a way. And I think it's the way the dialogue is delivered. It's very quick.
Yes.
There's often no pause between one character's line of dialogue and the next character's line of dialogue. And that is not something you really see in American cinema. To me, it's something that's very essentially English. I don't know why they do it, but I love it. It makes it feel very snappy.
Oh, yeah, it's perfect.
And it's also a good way of making your characters seem smart. You know what I mean? Because they take no time to respond. It's like, wow, sure came up with that quickly.
Actually, that's a good segue, because you're talking about how snappy the show is.
Yeah.
I fully believe that the editing and the cinematography work that they did in the BBC Sherlock was actually a huge influence on where we went with modern television and with modern movies. Specifically how they handled texts.
Yeah, I thought about that too. Like, anytime they were handling digital information, it was a really interesting and creative way to handle the problem of how do you convey that information in a way that is cinematic and interesting, but still legible and clear. When
I watched this show for the first time, I had never seen anything like it on screen before. Yeah. And then kind of in the post-Sherlock heyday, like, suddenly you're getting, you know, text popping up on screens all the time. Like, everybody's like, well, obviously this is just the best way to show a text, but...
Before that, no. You didn't see it. Yeah.
Most of the time it was over the shoulder and just, like, taking an actual video of the phone. But doing the text on the screen allowed for the reaction of the characters to be captured in the exact same moment as they're receiving the text.
I know, it's cool. Yeah, it's kind of ingenious. I think another thing they might have had an effect on is the cinematic way that they told their story, which I don't think is new for BBC, but it might have been new at the time for the reach that it had, because Sherlock became such a big show. Maybe in a way, as great as Sherlock was, it contributed to the downfall of modern television, because now all television thinks they have to be short movies, you know, no more than 8 episodes a season.
We will not blame Sherlock for that. Because you have to remember, at the same time, they were making Doctor Who, and they were doing...
Yeah, I won't blame Sherlock for it, but they did...
Don't blame Sherlock.
They did introduce a certain movie-like quality to their show, which I hadn't experienced before in a TV show. Yeah. Because each episode is about an hour and a half long, and they are shot with the quality and pacing of a film. Like, if you watch a singular episode of Sherlock, the journeys that the characters take emotionally, and, like, where they start and where they end, they go through change by the end of an episode. Much more so than you would see in most procedural type shows. Even ones that have character change.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong at all. I was just trying to go for a very positive spin on things.
Anyway. Other.
So for other, apart from the fact that I said this show is so gay. What I wanted to talk about was my theory that I thought of while watching this, and I wanted to tell you about this.
Let's hear it.
I think that the cabbie was full of shit.
Oh.
Like, right down to his fake gun. I said in the previous shots, the bottles have the 2 pills in them. When he sits down across from Sherlock, he has 2 separate pill bottles.
Yeah.
So there kind of wasn't, like, the implication of people taking 1 out of 2 pills out of the same bottle.
Interesting.
Implies that, well, how is the cabbie supposed to take it
Yeah.
at the same time as the person if it's in the same pill bottle? So my working theory...
I did not think about that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So we know by the end that the cabbie is like, I'm working for Moriarty. But I also believe that I said the cabbie was an attention whore and just wanted to seem cool in front of Sherlock.
Who doesn't?
It's true, but he just made the other people kill themselves at gunpoint.
Maybe.
I fully believe that those pills were both poisonous and he never took a single other pill, had no intention of doing it, and just did the setup to mess with Sherlock. And that was the beginning of the Moriarty mind games. I wouldn't be surprised if that was just Moriarty's idea in the first place. Was kill all these people in a way
that gets his attention. And boy, does it, because he gets super excited about it.
Let me scroll back. 4 serial suicides and now a note. Oh, it's Christmas.
I love him. I love his characterization.
Yep.
He's so delightfully horrible.
He is delightfully horrible. What a wonderful way to put that, Laurel.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
I really just wanted to talk about my theory, but I feel...
love that theory.
Do you enjoy it, or are you like...
I feel like I like it as a theory. It just, for me, takes away some of the excitement of Sherlock taking the pill and the cabbie taking the other pill and them staring each other down and both about to take the...
Yes.
I just love that moment.
I love the moment, but the whole point is that's Sherlock's downfall.
It is his downfall.
Is that he needs to be clever.
He needs to be clever.
And that's how people take advantage of him.
Yeah, it's true.
To the point where he might not even see this guy sitting across from me maybe isn't actually that smart. He's just messing with me.
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like I want to go back and rewatch it now and take a look at the bottles that you're mentioning have the 2 pills in it and see like what I think.
Yeah.
See if your theory holds water.
And I'm like, why is the other one just sitting there?
You know what I think about Sherlock's need to be clever?
Tell me what you think about Sherlock's need to be clever.
I'm going to say something mean. So this show was created by Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat.
Yeah.
I think Stephen Moffat wants to be Sherlock, and I think he also needs to be clever. And I think that is also his downfall. Because
you're right.
Sometimes he is clever, and sometimes he tries too hard to be clever, and he goes too far around, comes around the other end back to being not clever again. I think the only thing that I really wanted to say was to give credit to the show for the love and respect that they treat the source material with. I think that's what a big part of what made the show so good. Is you could tell they really were passionate about Sherlock Holmes. And now after I've just said something mean about Stephen Moffat, I will say that he is Sherlock in the bad ways, but he's Sherlock in the good ways too. Like, it is Christmas to him, you know? And I think that he brings that enthusiasm and that glee into his writing. And it comes through to the audience. And yeah, I think he infects the actors with it as well. So, you know, he's got his ups and downs.
That's beautiful, Laurel.
Thank you. Yeah. I think the show just sets up a lot of promises and delivers on them, mostly.
So, Does this pilot pass or does it fail? Pass. Laurel, it passes. We cannot do the thumbs up thing for like our audio listeners.
I don't see why not. I think they should just sit in silence and
sit in silence
what
with
they've
us.
done wrong.
We're gonna bathe in the sound of the void.
Bathe in the sound of the void as our thumbs wiggle in the air. It's a pass. Like, I loved Sherlock. Every time in between seasons, I agonized waiting.
Especially after Reichenbach.
Especially after freaking Reichenbach.
That was nightmarish.
How could they do that?
That was not a good time.
Not a good time. I just suffered for 3 years or however many in between.
But when we were watching it, it brought us immeasurable joy.
Indeed it did. Indeed it did.
And on that note, everyone, thank you for tuning in to episode... Hang on.
Wait, I think it's episode 12 of season 2. I could be wrong.
I was just about to be like, I almost said 13. I was like, no, we're not there yet. That's Supernatural.
Oh, I like that. Unlucky number for... That's a nice little serendipity.
Right?
Oh, all right.
Anyway, on that note, guys, thank you for joining us and listening to episode 12. Get excited because next week we're finishing up the last portion of our Superwholock series within the series, and we will be talking about Supernatural.
I'm supernaturally excited.
I am scared because I watched this once and it was traumatizing, and I'm ready to do it again.
I don't know if I've seen it.
You'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
All right.
Don't you worry.
Okay.
Anyway.
I trust you.
Thank you again, guys. And as always, keep it feral.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Effing It Up. If you're enjoying these episodes, please like and subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram at _effingitup_ or on our YouTube channel where we post the video format of our show. If you have content that you want us to cover, we want to hear about it. Feel free to DM us on Instagram or leave us a comment on our YouTube channel. Thank you again.